This is kind of a spur of the moment thing. I was archiving today. I was going to have a nice quiet day today and not do any entries and not do too many chores. And archiving is a matter of transferring from one hard drive to another primarily. And it's just tedious. You have to pay attention to what you're doing by the list, but it's kind of a no-brainer. And I came across one of Matthew's poems, which I've shared before. It's something that he wrote for Punch magazine in England. I can't absolutely prove that this is his. I know, myself that this is definitely his. I know from 11 years of studying his work, and I know because there's past life memory attached to it. And I know that because when I read it, I remember it, because it's exceptionally good and it's very funny. And if nobody appreciates it now, I'd like it to be recorded for the future. I know I talk about posterity. Well, that may be arrogant of me and it may not, but better be safe than sorry, So I'm going to go into a little of the background of this, and then I'm going to read it in its entirety. So this is Punch. It's very nice condition. This is the first half of 1851. And I've been through it. The humor is pretty sophisticated, a lot of it. It's, of course, it's geared toward the times, but you can still get a lot out of it. It's pretty funny stuff. So the context of this for Matthew is that in 1851, he was traveling the New England states, writing for the Boston Weekly Museum a travelogue under the name Quails. Historians believe that was an entertainer named Ocean Dodge, and the reason they believe that is that the editor, Charles A.B. Putnam, and Ocean Dodge colluded to make people think that that's who the author was. It got started as a rumor by one of the other authors because she saw that Dodge's itinerary seemed to match Quayle's itinerary. The reason for that is, as near as I can tell, and I've got a lot of background evidence for this, I'm just giving you the results, basically. It sounds like I'm just making it up, but I've got a lot of evidence. It looks as though Matthew was ghostwriting Ocean Dodge's routines and traveling with them, and that they were friends for a while. And Matthew was doing undercover anti-slavery work, acting as a liaison for William Lloyd Garrison, I think, and he would report his contacts through this seemingly frivolous travelogue, this kind of chatty travelogue. And when he made one of these contacts, he would never talk about the substance of their talk. He would make it, for example, I can't remember the name of the abolitionist, but there was one that's fairly well known. It's on the tip of my tongue. And this fellow, I'm almost thinking it was Lorenzo, I think. Anyway, he was known for having built his own house, and it was fairly eccentric. So there's no mention of abolitionism, no mention of slavery. There's only a mention of his house, see? And it goes on like that. When he meets with Daniel Webster, he just has one little line that mentions they talked about affairs of national interest. The rest of it was all just kind of a friendly chat, see? So Quayles goes on like that. That was Matthew. In July of 1851, the middle of this year, Matthew goes to Europe, attends the World Peace Congress. That's how I can definitely prove it's him, because he shows up in an illustration in the Illustrated London News in a large drawing of the opening ceremonies, see, that's in that newspaper. And it was done apparently with a loupe, because you can zoom way in and there's his portrait exactly where he says he's supposed to be in the reporter's box, which Ocean Dodge couldn't be because he doesn't have credentials as a reporter. And he doesn't look like Matthew close enough. That portrait is like photo accurate, even though it's teensy. So definitely that's Matthew. Now, let's see. This is when the London World's Fair was being held, 1851, in the Crystal Palace. Prince Albert was the one that commissioned that. It was a magnificent glass structure, and like all the world fairs, of course, all the countries had contributed. So there's a reference to that. Matthew also attended that and wrote about it. He was a reporter. He was operating as a reporter when he was writing as Quail. So this was a European travelogue, but he was a reporter by trade and, as his kind of bread and butter. There's a mention of him being a reporter. So he would often write satirical pieces about his reporting work, meetings. He apparently had reported on an awful lot of meetings, and they were pretty boring, most of them. And so he would write little parodies of them. So that's basically what this poem is. It's couched as a reporter attending a meeting, but this is a rather different kind of meeting, which you'll see in a minute. Mathew was a spiritualist at this time. So that's important to know because he's writing about ghosts, but he actually believes in them, see? So it's kind of tongue-in-cheek, but he's not really writing as a skeptic. And in this, was a real strong past life hit. I don't think I'll stop for it this time. I've already talked about it. But first off, I remember everything. And as I read it, I remember having written it. I remember what I thought was funny. And I've explained this in my talk to the Jungian group here in Brunswick in Maine. The higher mind does not die, or it changes very, very slowly over a great many incarnations, I think, but it doesn't really die. And when you reincarnate, you have the same higher mind. You don't remember, you don't have the same personality, physical personality, but the way your mind works, what you think is funny, what you value, your attitudes, all of that remains the same. You're the same person. And your emotions are the same. So those things come straight across and really don't die at all, as near as I can tell. That's what my research has indicated and proven, actually, to a pretty substantial extent. I can prove that. So my study is groundbreaking in that way. It's just a matter for somebody else to recognize that I've done groundbreaking work, because I have. Partly it's because of this unique circumstance of Mathew being completely hidden, but having so much information. So, in other words, I can take Mathew's writing and I can compare it to my writing before I found Mathew or before I had researched Mathew's work. And I can compare point for point. That's what I did in that talk with the Brunswick Jungians. Let's see. That's about all. The past life hit comes in where I talk about the knights where they talk about the statues in their buff like knights of old. And I've already talked about this, but I had a real strong hit that it made Abby giggle, and that I loved to make her laugh. And this was one that made her laugh. So I incorporated it into this poem. That's my guess, because this poem had to have been written long after Abby passed on. This is 10 years after Abby had passed on. And yet I distinctly remember that this made her laugh, So I must have, in fondness, and tribute, I must have brought it back and put it in this poem. Oh, the last thing is the style. This is Mathew's preferred meter, preferred style of poetry. You will find it in, I haven't done a survey, but I'm guessing 70 or 80% of the poems that he published are in this style. It's a style that I associate with religious poetry, but he didn't use it exclusively for religious poetry. Most of the time he used this meter. It was for serious things. And I could drag out 30 of them pretty easily, I think, 20 or 30. It's also exactly the same style. And when I say style, I mean subjective style, speaking as a layman, that was used in The Raven that Mathew wrote. It was used in the 4 poems that Elizabeth Barrett Browning plagiarized from him, including Lady Geraldine's Courtship. And scholars have mused over the fact that Lady Geraldine's Courtship, which came out a year earlier, is almost exactly the same style as The Raven. And Poe cleverly pretended to admit to be admiring Elizabeth Barrett, who would be Elizabeth Barrett Browning. He pretended to admire her to explain why there were such similarities and 2 lines that were almost identical. Well, that's because both of them were written by Mathew. So this humorous poem is written in exactly the same style and the same meter. Now, I know that there are people who study poetry academically who will argue with me that it's not the same style, and what they mean is there's some technicality that the last line is made longer, or there's some technicality, because Mathew used variations on this. He wasn't so lockstep as to always use exactly the same formula, but it's the same style, using the word in the layman's sense, definitely, and basically the same meter. So, I get so weary of people in denial coming up with tedious refutations, is that how you say it? Tedious arguments that really don't hold water. But with great vehemence, they'll pronounce things as though they know, and it's not logical. It doesn't really hold logically, and it's like, it's so frustrating. But, I've been there when I was a kid. I've been there. It's childish, basically, I can remember being that way when I was a teenager. Not as an adult. I can't. So anyway, I didn't mean to go into a somber note on that. It's tiring, it's not even, it doesn't even make me so much angry as it's just, All right. So here we have, and I'm going to put it up on the screen, The Groans of Wren's Ghost. And the gist of this is that a reporter has come for a kind of a meeting of ghosts, and these are the ghosts in St. Paul's Cathedral who are represented by the statues that are there. And those statues were not carved true to life as far as their attire is concerned. They put them in ancient, like Roman togas and things like that, which Matthew thinks is pretty ludicrous. So he starts it out as a humorous commentary on that. So the ghosts have come for a meeting in St. Paul's to complain about their attire. And then, was it Christopher Wren? Is that correct? Christopher Wren, the architect of St. Paul's Cathedral, shows up, as an august presence for the meeting, see? And the problem is what they really want to talk about is not just the way they're dressed. That's just the way he opens the poem. The real problem is that the priests are taking money from poor people in order to access St. Paul's, which is a travesty. And that's what Matthew is really commenting on. He just opens up with this silliness, see, to get people into the poem. Because this is really kind of a criticism of England, by an American. Of course, it's not signed. I'm 100% sure this is Matthew's poetry by style and all the other things I've mentioned. So the last part of it is Wren's ghost bemoaning and complaining about the fact that he built this beautiful cathedral so that the poor people could come and be elevated and forget their troubles. And here they have to pay more money to get in. See? So this is typical of Matthew, that he would mix the serious with the humorous. It's commented on where The Raven is first published, where he mixes grief and still some humor in it, and that's the case here. It was very often the case in Matthew's work. Excuse me while I get prepared. Still using my hand towels as Kleenex after the big toilet paper and Kleenex scare from the COVID-19 virus. Now, I'm going to bring this down a little bit. It won't be the best lighting for my face, but it'll help me to read. I'll probably stumble one or two times, but what I want is just immerse yourself in it, This is one of the best humorous poems, I think, Matthew. There's two or three that I would say are the best, and this is one of them. It's every bit as good as anything else in Punch, by the way. Matthew was writing poetry, humorous poetry, at age 12. So, he was a child prodigy. This was his first love, and he's world class in this. As the mighty hammer smiting 12 times on the metal falls, comes a rush of ghosts alighting in the nave of dim St. Paul's. And while through the marble sobbing circle still those waves of sound, mingled with them is a throbbing as of wide wings sweeping round. For tonight the ghosts are gathered of the great that slumber here, ill-used great, on whom are fathered all the marble monsters near. Johnson's ghost is there, disgusted at his naked legs of stone, legs that, save in silk or worsted, ne'er were e'en to Boswell shown. Howard, with a simple wonder at his dress of sheet and key, thinks they must have made a blunder, ne'er in such attire went he. Chiefs who wore cocked hats and feathers, on their tombs themselves behold, stripped e'en to their boots and leathers, in their buff like knights of old. While they gaze and groan and grumble o'er the lies art tells of all, with a sudden reverence humble to their ghostly knees they fall. For they feel a mighty presence growing dimly through the place, whereunto in mute obeisance boweth down each heart and face, looming bigger yet and bigger, filling up those vasty walls, not reduced to form or figure, 'tis his ghost that built St. Paul's. From the fabric he created for a trophy and a tomb, with his spirit permeated, now that spirit fills the gloom. O'er the ghostly circle round him blackly broods the shade of wren, from the ribs of stone that bound him, forced by sins of sordid men. Brother ghosts, I heard him mutter, I am here to speak my mind. 'Tis no time the church to butter, were I ever so inclined. What is that with thought and toiling of the hand and brain, evil times and tempers foiling, I for worship reared this fane? In my brain the stately vision shaped itself, but long I wrought ere I won, O rare fruition, outward shape to inward thought. And, I said, as sped my labor, green my memory will be, when the poor man by his neighbor walks St. Paul's and thinks of me. As the worship I have written in these characters of stone sinks within his spirit, smitten with a sense of awe unknown, poverty will pause from caring, toil will feel a saintly rest, and the weary and wayfaring entering in will straight be blessed. Hearts with sin or sorrow laden at the porch will leave their weight. Sinful man and erring maiden will pass lighter from the gate. So I dreamed, a weak adapter of the fancy to the fact. Were there not the dean and chapter and the coppers to be sacked? With one voice to poor and needy calling, enter, we beseech, with another whispering greedy for admittance, 2 pence each. Priests and prelates, in your groveling heedless how you smirch your gowns, into swollen pockets shoveling eagerly the wretched browns. Up, for shame, the world is trooping unto England's labor show. Let it not behold you stooping to such paltry gains and low. So he spake, the ghosts in chorus straight took up his dying fall, and rung out 3 groans sonorous for the dean and chapter all. And a general vote was passing, just as our reporter left, that the ghosts would quit en masse in case they still kept up the theft. I don't know what to say, you know. This is genius level work. Okay, this is inspired work. This is not genius as in clever, as in being able to run one's mind very quickly, as in like having a fast CPU. This is inspired work, you know. And so it is with much of Matthew's other work, the ones that were claimed by false pretenders and the ones that have never been discovered or heard of, like this one. See, there's many that are many works that I found of Matthew's that are every bit as good as the famous ones. See? And I want those things to be known. So I just wanted to get that on tape. Basically, I'm going to go back to my archiving. I've got my lunch to make in a little while in my quiet little world here as my savings gradually goes down and down and down and down, you know, and I don't know what's going to happen. But I don't know. I've got those emails to send out in about a little less than 3 weeks now, and we'll see if that doesn't stir up a little trouble, possibly. So once again, I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for watching.